Hello, my name is Eric Ford. Tonight I'll be covering the introduction to our healthcare innovation class. This class goes by a few numbers because it's been cross-listed for many years. It also was under a temporary number in two schools, so there are at least four numbers that may or may not appear. I believe the most current and correct numbers are for our business school colleagues, MBA 688, and that may have a couple of different prefixes along with it, depending on what program you were in. And for people in public health, it is HCO 634 currently, which will be its permanent number going forward. The course is completely online and asynchronous. With that said, every semester I do try to update about a third to a half of the content, and I will record those lectures live, and current students are more than welcome to join. All I ask is that you hold your questions to the end so that the presentation has the feel of a strict presentation, if you understand my meaning. So a couple updates for the course. We are now in what I'm calling the post-COVID period, and there have been some big changes. The most recent and biggest news that is really sweeping the healthcare innovation world and essentially the tech and educational worlds in general is the release of OpenAI's GPT-3 application. GPT-3 is a smart AI that generates text and does many other things, creates pictures, writes computer code, among other things. And to say it's really changing the way we're thinking about content creation would be a gross understatement. As recently as today, Microsoft announced that it will be integrating GPT-3 into PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and Access. So that's a fairly big leap. What happened during COVID-19? Well, COVID-19 was a boon in many ways for the healthcare innovation field. It accelerated the dissemination of many existing technologies. In particular, online sorts of interactions became very commonplace, and that was helpful for many people. It accelerated the technologies that seemed novel at the time. Perhaps chief among those is the one I'm using to record this tonight, something called Zoom. Prior to COVID, Zoom was a relatively small player. There was another company called Skype that had been bought by Microsoft, and Microsoft turned Skype into Microsoft Teams. And Zoom really took over, not only as a meeting and communication technology, but also for healthcare, making it possible to have remote healthcare sessions with your physician. It also surfaced the shortcomings of many existing technologies, in particular, the personal health record and those sorts of tools that we became to rely on much more heavily were really not very user-friendly. And I would tell you to this day, for those of you who use the personal health record, mine is not very user-friendly. And I'm a fairly sophisticated computer user and EMR researcher. So that tells you something. So I've already covered a few of the COVID-driven technology changes. The big one, telehealth. And the thing that made telehealth wasn't that we didn't have the technology, it was that the regulators and insurers really didn't compensate for telehealth visits. And it was their relaxing of those rules that made telehealth very popular. We saw a lot of experimental drug use and treatments, a lot of which did not come to bear fruit. In other words, people were using many drugs in an attempt to treat COVID that really weren't appropriate and didn't do anything to help mitigate either the disease's spread or the impact of the disease once you had it. A third innovation was contact tracing. For those of you who are in public health, this is classic shoe leather epidemiology. We used to do this with clipboards going door to door. More modern forms would allow us to use telephones to call people and create databases. And in its most advanced form, we could use phone tracking to see if you came within close proximity to other people who may or may not be infected. Of course, that opened up all sorts of issues about privacy and other similar concerns. However, given the infections rate of COVID, it was really about the only way to get in front of it. Simply sending out postcards or making phone calls, by the time you reach somebody who was infected, they'd already infected everybody else they were going to. So that would have been one of the shortcomings. I mentioned earlier the phenomena of working from home, flexible work. This is a more general management principle, and we're still coming to grips with what the new work environment looks like. New screening technologies. At one point, UAB, where I currently work, had us check in on an application every day to tell them 5 or 6 questions. How are you feeling? Are you running a temperature? That kind of thing. And again, e-commerce really picked up. Prior to COVID, my parents, who were in their 80s, I won't say they were Luddites, but they were not very technologically savvy. Tonight, when I talked to my mother, the Grubhub guy was at the door and she was waiting for her grocery delivery to come. So things have changed, needless to say. And the other part was virtual training. And also I would say, and I probably should have updated this slide, virtual mental health has been a very big field. And if people wanted to do research on that, that would be a very welcome topic. But Peloton really took off during COVID. However, post-COVID, Peloton has been on relatively hard times, I would tell you. So what were some of the shortcomings that were revealed by COVID? Public health preparedness, in particular, things like supply chain management. We really don't teach supply chain management in public health, and it was to our detriment. The thought that all of a sudden things like masks and ventilators and those things would appear simply because we ordered them was completely false. It just didn't happen. One of my favorite quotes is, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." This was said by a man named Mike Tyson, who was a fairly famous boxer, and I can assure you, you would not want to get punched in the mouth by him. Public health reporting. Johns Hopkins really took the lead on this, and this begged the question, where was the federal government, in particular the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, who ostensibly should have been the leader in this? One strange thing about this disease that we really didn't get a good handle on was who needed to be vaccinated, who was at risk, etc. There's 2 ways you get something called herd immunity. Herd immunity is when people have either had the disease or been vaccinated at a sufficient rate that we think the spread will be slow and manageable. Well, one of the things we didn't realize was that children and young adults were really not susceptible to the illness. They were susceptible to getting the virus, meaning that they got the virus, they could transmit the virus, but they didn't tend to get sick, much less die from it. We could have had a great deal of herd immunity spread through, say, our K through college students, kindergarten through college age groups, had we not shut down all of our educational endeavor, and we would have really gotten a lot of herd immunity. And then we could have focused our vaccines on those people who were at risk for getting sick and having greater mortality, in particular the elderly and those people with multiple comorbidities. We just didn't have a good grip on it, and we weren't thinking about it right. And my biggest concern is we're not even having the discussions after the fact to think about how we might have managed this different. Very troubling. So the reason the people who are online tonight are here is, what about the course this year? What does it take for me to get an A? Easy enough. There's one big change that I'm going to introduce, and that's a new assignment. But first, let me say the course is completely asynchronous. There is no requirement that you ever be at an appointed place and time to interact with me personally. Everything will be recorded that I make, and you can watch it at your leisure. With that said, I think many students benefit from being in the live course. So all things will be on Zoom, no attendance required. So what are the big topics? As I alluded to earlier, the sudden boom in what we're calling artificial intelligence, I'm not calling it that personally. It is an advance in learning systems and language processing. Is it artificial intelligence? I would not say so. There is something called the singularity, and this is sort of a science fiction term, but this is when the machines become self-aware. If you've seen the Terminator movies, that's the big send-off that starts that whole thing. And clearly the machines are not self-aware at this juncture. They've just become far good at replicating one aspect of the human condition, and that is in fact content generation. And not just content generation in text or code or art, all of it. And this is what we would call general generation. And that's very impressive. I mean, it's no small feat, and I don't mean to diminish it by saying it's not AI. It's very important. And to that extent, to that end, I've actually added a new assignment. It's an alternative assignment. You can still do what I traditionally used to do, which is what I call the AHRQ assignment, AHRQ, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. And both of those are listed in your syllabus. Subsequent to this introductory lecture, but on this same call, I'm going to go over an introduction to artificial intelligence. A couple other things. As I said, I typically replace a third to half of my content, and I will have at least 2 or 3 guest lectures. One of the big new innovations that's come along in healthcare is the use of something called metadata or log data to improve the management of the healthcare workforce. Metadata has many appealing qualities in that it doesn't have any patient health information. It's simply letting us see how the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, other clinical people are managing their day, and suggests ways that we might improve things like pharmacy management, the electronic health record interface, etc. So this metadata is a bold new area, and the guest speaker we're going to have in a week or 2 is a man named A.J. Holmgren. He's a Harvard-trained PhD and really one of the leaders in the field. He works at the University of California, San Francisco currently. I'm really excited about having him. We also are going to have a guest lecture on EHR innovations, including exchange of data. And this is from a man named Dr. Daniel Walker, and he's at Ohio State University's Medical College. Again, somebody who's literally on the cutting edge of this field. I think it'd be really good to be able to watch him live and ask them questions. Again, I have quite a lot of videos and didactic material up online, including as a philosophy, when I can go directly to the source and get people like Clayton Christensen, who is no longer with us, passed a few years ago, but Clayton Christensen was the person who thought about what is a disruptive innovation. And when you think about things like Uber, innovations that totally disrupted an industry, in particular taxis and rental cars, that's what he thought of. And he talks about what they are, what they mean. And I just go ahead and put him up. I could do a lecture on that, but why not go to the source? Again, I'm going to do a couple of interviews. And if any of you know any local companies that are doing innovative things and might be good to interview, please let me know. The 2 or 3 big parts of the course are the social media posts. I've asked you to join me either on typically Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and using those to post on a twice-a-week basis. What should you be posting? Well, if you want to follow along with the course and put up content that's related to this week's module, that's perfectly fine and always most welcome. If you want to put up stuff that's not contained in the course, but that you found in your own personal news feeds or readings, that's fine too. As a matter of fact, preferred in many ways. So if you'll put those up in the social media, however, in order to document that you're performing the work, I need to get it into Canvas. And this is a university requirement that they want to have demonstration of your work product for their accreditors and other people's. When you post it into Canvas in the discussion boards, please also take the time at this juncture to respond to 2 of your peers. All right. So the social media and discussion board posts are in effect the same thing. You just need to follow through on both parts. All right. The other 2 deliverables are, as I mentioned earlier, the OpenAI project, or GPT-3 for short, that I'm going to discuss in just a moment, or the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality Innovation project. Both of them are completely covered in the syllabus. Please look them over. Oh, a couple of notes on the social media. Please do use our hashtags and @signs to make sure that we're getting credit. Part of my goal in this is to increase the visibility of our institution as a leader in healthcare innovation, and using these really helps us out, and it's part of the purpose. All right, I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. The big assignment, the written assignment, the assignment that needs to be turned in is either the classic Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality program or the OpenAI project. All right, a couple closing remarks. Let's have fun. This is a course that's supposed to be engaging, getting you to think different, as Steve Jobs would have said, and to really think about the future and how you can position yourself as a young professional to better meet that future. Thank you. Any questions? I know there are questions. I'll wait.
Hey, I have one question. Which discussion boards we're supposed to be posting the social media posts to? Do we just do it to the date that matches the social media due date?
That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. And the posts are due every Wednesday and Friday?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have a TA for this class, so, and there's a lot of you this time, so I may be running a little behind. So don't fret too much if I'm not responding back to all of your posts in real time.
Also about the posts, they can be about anything that is innovative in healthcare, if I understand you correctly.
That's correct. And there is so much, I posted up into the Canvas site a lecture on the areas of innovations, but there's new pharmaceuticals, if that's an area that interests you, new delivery care models, new technologies related to the electronic medical record, things like the wearables is a very active area. Well-being programs at the organizational level is a rapidly growing area. How do you change behaviors? You may hear some of these commercials online about like Noom that are motivational interviewing systems, is what I would call them, but they're online systems that give you personalized counseling. There's so much going on. The world is your oyster.
Perfect. And I think I read something about a content calendar. Are we still doing that? Are we basically entering this? Is there supposed to be a system, or are we just documenting this in a spreadsheet and then handing that in at some point?
There's a spreadsheet available in the Canvas site, and it's just so at the end of the term, I can look at it, and in case I haven't touched every one of your submissions or posts, I can look at it quickly and make sure you're getting full credit.
Okay, but it's not like a content calendar strategy for an organization that we're putting together.
No.
Okay. Okay.
I tried that. It's funny you say that. That was actually the initial intent of that project, but that was a little bit of a stretch, especially in a 7-week class, which is how the MBA students are taking it.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes.
So for the submission, well, for the post submissions, it says at 11:59 p.m. So does that mean that they have to be posted at 11:59 or by 11:59?
By 11:59. I really recommend you get them in earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ford, this is Allie Howe. I just see that this week it's Thursday and Saturday to post. And then continuing on for the rest of the quarter, the session, it's Wednesday, Friday, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But that was
And-
really just me giving everybody a little slack. If you were to get onto the Wednesday, Friday cycle this week, you'd be in good stead.
Be better off that way. And I also have another question. I joined the Facebook UAB Health Innovation group.
Uh-huh.
So we post there. We also keep the calendar, what we've posted. And then we also put it in Canvas. Is that correct?
Right. You copy and paste the content from your social media post into the Canvas discussion board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little onerous and it's not of my making, but they need the documentation for accreditation reasons.
Sure. Thank you for clarifying.
Oh, no problem. There's something in the chat. Hold on one second. So somebody asked, is there any discrepancy with using GPT-4 instead of GPT-3? If you have access to GPT-4, I need to talk to you. As far as I know, GPT-3 is all that's currently available. And even that, I'm not sure if they've made it fully publicly available. GPT-3 chat is publicly available, and it's a slightly more limited version. GPT-3 has some other settings that you can use, and I'm going to show that in the next lecture. GPT-4 is the next thing that's coming, and people are looking forward to it. But if you have access, let me know. I'm in. All right, let's move along.